The Balts knew about Christianity from their prisoners, although not much. Therefore, the apostolic activities of Bishop Adalbert of Prague in 997 and monk Bruno of Querfurt in 1009 in Prussia could not have been successful. Prussians and later Lithuanians defended their lifestyle, as well as intellectual and political independence, by protecting their religion. This is indicated by the baptism of Mindaugas, his family and many other Lithuanians in 1251, as well as attempts to establish the Lithuanian diocese. Lithuanian Bishop Kristijonas, who was a monk of the Teutonic order, did not feel safe among the hostile neophytes and heathens. In 1254–59, he and other priests and monks sought to Christian Lithuanians, but no signs of these efforts could be traced after the assassination of the king in 1263. Thus the management of political affairs by religious means was not successful, and the apostolic activities of German clergymen, which lasted for several years, did not change the negative image of Catholics. After Mindaugas, as the state was expanding to the east, some Lithuanian dukes joined the Orthodox Church. Orthodox Vaišvilkas, one of Mindaugas' sons, was ruling Lithuania for some time, while fugitive Daumantas, who took on Timothy's name, became an Orthodox saint.
In
1298, an alliance between Vytenis and Riga opened Lithuania for new contacts with the Catholics. Two Franciscan monks were always present at his court. Franciscans built St. Nicholas Church in Vilnius. A real opportunity to introduce Christianity in Lithuania emerged in Gediminas' times. However, an attempt at baptism in 1322–24 failed due to animosity between Teutonic knights and pagans. The Catholics and the Orthodox Church remained in Lithuania. The sovereign declared that he did not forbid the Catholics and the Orthodox people to worship God, while we follow our rites in worshipping God, and we all have one God. Based in Vilnius and Naugardukas, Franciscans took care of foreign merchants and craftsmen. It is probable that they secretly spread Catholicism among pagans as well. The eastern parts of the state were inhabited by the Orthodox believers. The Lithuanian dukes were being baptized, married Orthodox women, and built churches. When Algirdas became the ruler of Lithuania, the clergyman brought by his Russian wife Maria spread Christianity in the capital city. Orthodox merchants and craftsmen were settling in the towns of ethnic Lithuania, especially in Vilnius and Trakai. The Christian neighbors had a favorable influence on Lithuanians. Secret apostolic work gave opportunities to start believing. However, the sovereigns tolerated only the baptism of dukes in the eastern provinces and resisted the Christianity of their subjects in the ethnic provinces. In 1341, Gediminas condemned Franciscans Ulrich and Martin, who were preaching in Vilnius. It is known that Algirdas condemned disobedient Orthodox courtiers Anthony, John and Eustathius in Vilnius around 1347. Algirdas also condemned 5 Franciscans for preaching in Vilnius in around 1369. Orthodox Metropolitan Bishop Cyprian converted some of the heathens around 1374, but the conditions for the natural spread of Christianity were unfavorable. Christian teachings could not affect the minds or the lives of Lithuanians. As Jogaila ascended to the throne of Catholic Poland, relations with the Catholic Church changed rapidly. Dukes, prominent noblemen and heathen townsmen were baptized in Vilnius in February and March of 1387. It was declared that all Lithuanians must be Catholics. Orthodoxy was curtailed. Therefore, its votaries did not trust Catholicism. Samogitians were baptized in 1413 and 1417 through Vytautas' efforts. Educated Lithuanians took up important positions in the Catholic Church. Vilnius chapter and cathedral school were at the center of the spread of Christianity. There was a great lack of preaching monks. About 40 churches were built in Vilnius and Medininkai dioceses by 1430. Places of spiritual guidance were scarce, while the churches were often small. The origins of Catholic Lithuania were authoritarian. The sovereign ordered baptisms, set religious relations, and founded parishes. The sovereign oversaw the preparation and the services of the clergy as well. However, the clergymen, whose number was small, and especially the laity, remained fairly passive. Catechization and spiritual guidance were weak and could not satisfy the needs. Nevertheless, Catholicism was on the rise. Noblemen began to seek religious careers. However, paganism was widespread until the middle of the 16th century, because there used to be only one parish per 240 to 600 square kilometers in those times, and only 1 in 3 had schools. Therefore, regular spiritual guidance was confined to towns, townships, and the surrounding villages. Most peasants lived without sacraments. In 1553, squires and noblemen split into Calvinists and Catholics faithful to Rome. As before, there were quite a few Orthodox believers as well. The choice of landowners determined the confession of their subjects. Townspeople polarized into Lithuanian Catholics, Russian Orthodox believers, and German Lutherans. Lithuanian Lutheranism and its scriptures did not spread from Prussia. As the Catholic Church was losing its power and Protestant communities were gradually increasing, the Christianing of Lithuanians slowed down. The vestiges of the old religion became more visible. The Calvinism of the Lithuanian nobility caused tension with the elites of Catholic Poland. This was one of the reasons for the Union of Lublin of 1569. In the middle of the 16th century, the Jesuits arrived and began taking care of the poor situation of the Catholic Church. They managed to attract the multilingual and multi-confessional Lithuanian youth. Vilnius University and a dozen of colleges established by the Jesuits conditioned the general education. The publication of Lithuanian Catholic literature began at the end of the 16th century. Jesuit monks inaugurated social and political changes. The otherwise tolerant nobility was predisposed against Jesuit foreigners and obstructed changes. The Union of Brest, formed between the Commonwealth's Orthodox believers and Catholics in 1595 and 96, was more successful. Although there was a lack of educated clergymen and Roman Catholics gave little support, many Orthodox believers became Uniates in the course of the century due to the efforts of Basilian monks. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church was growing stronger, supported by the rulers and reinvigorated by the Jesuits. Charitable work was performed in towns and townships. The cult of St. Casimir, the patron of Lithuania, was increasingly widespread since 1604. Lithuanians and Samogitians finally became Christians. However, the Russian occupation of 1655 to 61, the monopoly of the Jesuits on studies, and the religious balance in Europe in 1648 brought the decline of Catholic education. Piarists who arrived at the end of the 17th century offered modern studies, contemporary language, accounting, natural sciences, history, and law. Their schools rejected the scholasticism and the vainglory of the nobility. Lectures were simple, and the freedom of philosophy was permitted. One of the aims was to give students civic moral education. Piarists appealed to the youth. Student performances criticized the maladies of society. The example of Piarists and the ideas of the Enlightenment prompted the Jesuits to update their teachings. It regained its attractiveness within several decades. Vilnius University was renowned for physics, mathematics, and astronomy. In 1759, the Jesuits issued the first Lithuanian newspaper, Kurier Litevski. Priests spoke out against the serfdom, capital punishment, and for the work of the nobles. When the Jesuits were outlawed in 1773, the Educational Committee, guided by bishops, preserved the balance between belief and knowledge. The educated people brought up by the Catholic Enlightenment were the proponents of changes in the society and the state. Many clergymen took part in the crucial events at the end of the 18th century. During the times of the Russian Tsarist rule, Catholics were separated from the Pope. Although the Church was arbitrarily reorganized and thoroughly constrained, most bishops and priests preserved their inner freedom. Some became the initiators of cultural and social transformations. Samogitian bishop Giedraitis founded schools and rallied intellectuals. His works contributed to the development of Lithuanian writing. The bishop himself translated the New Testament. Most priests joined the uprising of 1831. Oppression was growing harder. Monasteries were accused of being the nests of Latin propaganda and the roots of the uprising, while orthodoxy was turning into the destroyer of the Lithuanian identity. In the middle of the 19th century, the temperance and education movement, promoted by the Pope, stimulated a new approach to ordinary Catholics. They began to be regarded as persons to be cherished. Bishop Motiejus Valančius organized a temperance and literacy movement, the printing of Lithuanian books in Prussia and their secret transportation to Lithuania. Self-respect, curiosity, and hope for a better future were instilled in the village people. The village became socially active. The priests of that time formed the intellectual core effecting changes in the country. Although Catholicism was associated with Polishness in Vilnius region, temperance and cultural movements paved the path for the national revival and thereby for the re-establishment of the state.
19-20 amžiaus sandūroje
When restrictions were lifted at the end of the 19th century, Catholics intensified spiritual, cultural and social activities. St. Casimir Society published about 50 books over several years, and 114 churches were built with the funds of the peasants by the First World War. Priests had an important role in re-establishing the state as well. 4 priests were signatories of the Declaration of Independence, and 11 were members of the Constituent Assembly. The foundations of the state were laid when the Christian Democrats and nationalist farmers were in power. The constitution, the currency, and the land reform were initiated. Priests were an important pillar of the state. For example, Prelate Kropavicius was both the author and the implementer of the land reform. There were many public church organizations acting at national level. Social care was entrusted to the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. A3e, or the Future Society, were particularly influential among school children and students, and the Labor Federation was influential among workers. However, the church's image was damaged by the conflict with Poland. As a result of political developments and the secularization of society, nationalist ideology became more influential. The nationalists, who were in power since 1926, restrained clericalism, especially in politics and education. Dozens of priests and many laymen were prosecuted. Therefore, when the state found itself in danger in 1940, the confrontation between the nationalists and Catholics obstructed the mustering of citizens. Nevertheless, the Lithuanians were a moral Catholic nation. The Soviets did not wait long to attack Catholicism in Lithuania and attempted to turn the Lithuanians into atheistic people. The activities of the Catholic Church were limited to liturgy and the churchyard, and the trespassing of this space was considered to be anti-Soviet and punishable act. Moral and physical violence, ideological diversions and cultural policies set Lithuanians against Catholicism. Many people stopped practicing faith, and consumerism, alcoholism, and divorces started increasing. Others withstood these pressures and even fought back, attending the church frequently. The more resolute clergymen published underground religious and pedagogical literature, trained clerics, and taught children religion. Illegal nuns were particularly distinguished in this regard. The Hill of Crosses was an important symbol of spiritual and national resistance during the Soviet times. Public defense of the rights of the church and believers started in 1968. Many people suffered for it, but these activities scotched the Soviet regime, disrupted the veil of disinformation, and inspired the hope of preserving religion and national identity. From 1985 until the restoration of independence in 1990, the Catholics were among the first who were actively destroying the regime and seeking to return the traditional Western culture.